Bonjour, Monsieur Dixon Jones.
Bonjour Laurent, comment
allez-vous?
Très bien, merci.
We keep on going in French, or
let's try English for it. I think everyone will be grateful.
So yes, everyone, welcome back to SEO Conspiracy in the singular now instead of plural. I switched. And today, topic of the day, the myth of the day, is about the mysterious black box of trying to train Googlebot. And
so fresh content and Googlebot capacity, basically.
Yeah, can we? The topic really is: does fresh content help SEO? Furthermore, is it gonna increase your crawl budget?
The crawl budget, yeah. Okay, yeah.
Also, yeah. Googlebot analytics.
I remember quite a few years ago. There was an ex-SEO called Pierre Farr, who some people may know. I think he's not French, even though his name's Pierre. I think he's Jordanian, actually. But anyway, he did a presentation on crawl budget on Google, and he was saying that Googlebot or the crawl budget for your website is not dictated. It is primarily dictated on by how Googlebot perceives its stress on the server, not on the web page or the website. It assumes that, if it just crawls your web page, it will be able to cope with it. The thing is that it's doing, lots and lots and lots of stuff at the same time. So if it's hitting your server and 100 pages at the same time, that's potentially 100 concurrent, hits on the server. And what I think is important for SEOs to check is how many other websites and how many other web pages really are also on the same IP address, on the same web server as your own website. If you've got cheap hosting, this is a real challenge for cheap hosting, because you may find that you've got your €2 a month hosting package, and then you find that there's 200 other websites on the same server. You've got 10 pages on your website, and then there's this other one that's got a whole copy of Wikipedia on the site or something, the millions and millions of pages. So then Google is sitting there crawling this other website so much so that it says, oh, okay, I haven't got time to hit these pages as well. So I think that's important, and Majestic has a neighborhood checker tool that lets you see what other websites are on the same IP number. So it's worth going and have a look.
But do you also mean that if I have my server near Mountain View, it's better than if I'm in London?
No, I don't think that. I don't think that matters at all. I think Google is doing all of its. The vast majority of Googlebot is coming from Mountain View, apart from some testing and things. But and that may affect your page speed a little bit. But I think that Google has to take that into account, don't they?
And also, I shouldn't say that because I'm talking to Mr. Majestic. But
I was Mr. Majestic. I'm just a pawn in somebody else's game now.
No, you made Majestic, right? There's someone behind the scene, but the front face, the one for decades who made what Majestic is today, is nobody else than Mr. Sir Dixon Jones.
Yeah. I'm trying to build up inlinks now, so
True. Okay. If you succeed with inlinks like you did Majestic, and you will.
We'll see what we do. Hope so.
And you will. But what is interesting is also that cloaking, right, is a black hat, supposedly a black hat technique, but it's also a very white hat technique to get rid of all those bots, including Majestic, who are taking all the bandwidth from your server. And some of those bots are really, really, really aggressive. Majestic is pretty aggressive, but not the most. And if you just you send them, I like to send them to 200, so I'm not sending them like a 403 or something. Okay, they see just a blank page, but they're like, okay, 200 header, nothing to see, I I check somewhere else. While Googlebot, I let it enter the server. And anyway, I don't want my stuff to be on all those tools.
And what sort of signal do you think that sends as a as to whether you're a white hat or black hat? If you're blocking all of the other crawlers, are you sending a good signal out there or a bad signal? Because if you're doing that, then there is a consequence of doing that. There is you leave a flag, and I think
you leave it. Very, very good. Of course you do. So if you are doing, like, if you're on the wearing the black hat, that's definitely a red flag. But if you have nothing to worry about, if you're really clean, but for sure it's raising a red flag.
I think there's other things, dangerous things about doing that as well. I mean, and maybe it's very true that, of course, I don't want people to block my bots, but Encapsula do a study every year of how much traffic is human, and it's at best 50%. It's about 50%. 50% of that traffic is non-human, at least when they come to that site, when it's coming to that site. Now, here's an interesting thing: is that doesn't mean to say that a human is never going to see that information. That information may be getting cached into other systems that are seen in a cached way. It may be getting crawled by other search engines. It may be getting syndicated through your content. May need to go through that kind of collection phase. Well, it certainly needs to go through the collection phase to go be seen on Google, but then Google is using other data sources as well. So if Google is using other data sources for verification of information, there's all sorts of reasons why, if you haven't got a bandwidth problem, i.e. if you spend an extra £2 a month on your hosting, you're not going to have a bandwidth problem anyway. Now, you might want to block Majestic and Ahrefs because you want to be, stop your competitors from seeing where you're linking to, and I think that's just a red flag at that point. But if you start blocking all the bots, don't be surprised if you're getting a lot less traffic from human beings as a result of the fact that your information isn't getting syndicated to the places that human beings need to see it.
So now the middle ground is not pure cloaking; it's through HTXS to block, like, really the spammy bots, but even if you block them, like, from an IP level, they change IP. It's difficult.
And here's the other thing. Okay, maybe we've moved on from Google budget, crawl budget to bots. But here's the other thing about that is that people block. If you're trying to block bots, you're only blocking the ones that identify themselves. That's just crazy, man. It's one line of code. If my bot doesn't want to be seen, I have to physically say that I am MJ12 or Ahrefs bot or whatever. So I've actively got to tell you that I'm a good. At which point I'm a good bot. The bad ones are pretending they're humans. They're pretending they're Chrome or Firefox or Mozilla, and probably are Mozilla or Firefox or whatever.
No, I mean, what we do is we know that Google is 64.249, and we focus on that. But let's move back to do whatever you want to block or not block the bot. But
don't block the bots, guys. Don't block the bots. It's shooting yourself in the foot in a lot of ways. But I am biased.
You get anyway, and again, I know where I come from. I'm not wearing a black hat just for the look. I used to be on the dark side. I came back from it because things moved on, right? And it was fun at the beginning. But yeah, I'm not what I call a Teletubbies SEO, and I promise to tell you everything straight up. But now it's really at your own risk. We give information. You got to be responsible with what you do. I'm responsible with what I do. I don't complain. And I'm not going to be like, oh my God, someone told me to block the bots and now my traffic. No.
You got two people here and we disagree. You want to block the bots. I think it's a stupid idea. And I think that you do your site more harm than good. And I think Some of the CDNs block stuff as well, and I think they're doing more harm than good. If you think it's causing you a problem, use crawl delay or something like that. So Majestic obeys crawl delay. Interestingly, since we're getting back to crawl budget for Googlebot, they don't obey crawl delay in robots.txt. So
really?
they don't use that command at all. Well, they use obviously robots.txt, but they only use basically whether they think they're hurting. They mainly use whether they think they're putting too much load on the server to control their budget. So I think to whether fresh content is going to increase the crawl budget, probably not. They'll probably work out that site is getting updated faster, and go and see the fresh content more regularly. But that could be at the expense of recrawling the old content, wouldn't you say?
Well, so now you give us the information that on the IP level, on the server level, there is an issue, but there is also the power of the page, or the page rank of the page, that is also more of a signal than the freshness of the content.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with that.
And maybe the freshness of the content is more about habit of crawling, meaning Googlebot is going to figure out that every day at 7 o'clock you publish a new piece of content, and it's going to know that information, and it's going to come back every day at 7 o'clock. That's why on the forum we see always Googlebot. On a big active forum, you always see Googlebot there. But it doesn't mean that Googlebot is crawling the entire site.
No. Well, of course, Google's got, it doesn't matter how big an organization is. They have two competing resources that they have to blend. And I saw some Google guys talk about this at PubCon in Vegas last year, actually. But, and it's certainly something that any large web crawler has to think about. Firstly, you've got fresh content, so content that you've never seen before, and your bot has to go and find those enough. And then you've also got changing content that already exists. And that blend, they're both infinite numbers. There's both an infinite number of new pages coming on the web and an infinite number of existing pages. And I mean infinite because you can just add parameters to URLs forever and just carry on going. So at some point, any system has to say, oh, that's enough crawling. And then the question is, how much do you blend? Do you want to do 50% new crawl, 50% recrawl? Well, that's okay for a while, but eventually there's going to be so much stuff that you've got to recrawl that 50-50 doesn't work anymore. You can't, there isn't enough new stuff that's important. So that balance is always a challenge for a crawler.
And from the owner of the website point of view, people got to understand that if you translate the time that Googlebot is going to spend on your site into a number of pages, let's make it simple. Your website is 1,000 pages, and the time allocated to your website for crawling is 1,000 pages. Don't believe that it's going to crawl the 1,000 pages of your website. It's probably going to crawl 800 times the homepage and 200 pages.
Yeah, good point. And I think also this is another reason why Google wants speed. It wants why they've been apart from saying because it's good for the user. Another good reason that they want speed is so that they can make particularly big improvements. So they have made huge improvements in recent years to their JavaScript rendering. So if your JavaScript is taking a lot of time, then that all counts, because for Google to do their black box bit in the middle, they take the raw code and then they throw a little bit of it into what they call a web rendering engine, or WSC, I think, web something, anyway, which tries to recreate the DOM, the stuff you see in the inspect when you inspect on Chrome, and then put that into the crawl so that it does it within minutes. Now it effectively has called most of the JavaScript and reconfigured it so that it's what you see in your inspect tool in Chrome, and then puts that through the system. So if it can't do that fast, then it can't scale it well. So that's why it gets angry about people having slow loading web pages. It's because that kind of breaks, and they have ways around it, but it's a good reason to make your page speed fast.
I think the message today is actually not even about do you have fresh content or not, but we need to make people understand that checking out the log, checking out what Googlebot does on your website is more important from an SEO perspective. I'd rather look at the logs than the analytics. My visitor is called Googlebot, and it's if you go back in the old days, we had really terrible tools. We had Excel to check the files, right? Yeah. And if you had a big website, you need a big powerful computer with. It was crashing a computer, and then we had stuff like AWS Stat that was just nothing.
Yeah.
Now we got unbelievably powerful tools to check the logs for auditing at one point, and also monitoring the logs. Two different things. And third, also you crawl the website with your own crawler, even like a Screaming Frogs and whatever it is. So you crawl the website, you see how your crawler does it. You check how Googlebot crawls the site at one point. That's just one audit. And also higher level, you monitor the logs, and it should be like mandatory. It should be like you are SEO, you have a website, logs. It's all about logs, because we only before we were totally blind. Now we are half blind. We see the first step. Google discovers the page. Yep. The last step, the page is returned into the SERP. We don't see anything in between, but at least we see the beginning and the end. Before, or you don't see anything.
It's true. And I think we as SEOs have a tendency to get wrapped up in the things we can see, and we forget about the stuff that we can't. We pretend that it doesn't exist, but yeah, it's the most important parts for sure.
Remember that we have Sir Dixon Jones here.
I'm not a sir. That's a lie.
You got the pin from the Queen.
I got a pin from the Queen. Yeah. Well, Majestic got the pin, actually. I was just a representative.
Oh, by the way, if someone in the comment can say what is that formula on Dixon's T-shirt, that person got a bonus point. Or backlink on the homepage from Majestic.
Okay, we'll bring it up in another another session.
Yeah. Okay. That formula is going to be the topic of another session. And to wrap it up about the logs, it's also it could be like a 5-hour discussion. We can't cover this in just a few minutes, but. To stress out the importance of logs is, before, old dogs like us, we had to help index websites. Yep. They didn't index well. Now they index too well. Like 300 e-commerce websites could go up to 300,000 pages in a snap of a finger, and that there's no better self-negative SEO with that type of duplicate content. Even if Google is smart, it can say, okay, this is crap and not crap. That's going to be another topic for another video.
I think before you worry too much about things, though, for a lot of people, smaller websites they really shouldn't be having a crawl problem. Google should be seeing their sites and their pages pretty quickly. And I mean, if you've got no links coming in and you've got no way for Google to kind of see your sitemaps and things, and it doesn't care about your website, fine. Then you've got a problem of getting some kind of credibility. But I think that the problems really are only with the e-commerce and the really large websites, because the crawl budget, Google should be easily able to crawl small sites within a very short period of time of when new content gets up. And I don't think it goes faster because you're putting up pages, fresh pages, just for Google. I think it's more important.
It might help the crawl habit, but not the crawl budget.
Yeah.
But yeah, be careful of, and when it's spending time crawling those duplicated URL that are auto generating themselves, it's not doing something else more useful on the website anyway.
Yeah. Okay. What are we going to be talking about next week?
Oh, we're going to talk about the Google guidelines. Is that the law of SEO?
Oh, yeah. Okay. White hat versus black hat. We'll have fun on that one then.